from all angles. My name is Sean Higgins. I am host and moderator of this program. During this program, you will hear America's teenagers discuss and debate major social, political, and economic issues our world faces today, and how those issues might be resolved in the future. During this segment of the program, my classmates and I will take an in-depth look at the issues surrounding the death penalty. More to the point, we will try to get an angle on whether the death penalty is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. This segment will be focused on the death penalty debate and how it impacts the United States community. My classmates and I conducted historical and current research on this topic over the past couple of weeks. We will share that research, providing some insight into the politics and social and legal issues surrounding the debate on the death penalty. The question is, does the death penalty violate the Eighth Amendment? I will now invite my panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Yasmin Rafai. I am a junior in Dr. O'Leary's 7th period U.S. History class and in Dr. O'Leary's Legal Studies class. I am a figure skater and a member of the National Honor Society, and I took an in-depth look at the research of political, domestic, and religious organizations that are opposed to the death penalty.
Hi, I'm Sarah Mirza. I'm a junior in Dr. O'Leary's Period 7 U.S. History 2 class. I am a two-time world team member for USA Fencing, and I took an in-depth look on whether or not it's permissible to use the death penalty on juveniles or mentally ill.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Soto, junior and part of the Wayne Hills softball team, also student executive producer from All Angles. I will be currently discussing the social, religious, and political domestic organizations who support the death penalty as a punishment.
Hi, I'm Jordan Gershon. I'm a member of the Wayne Hills ice hockey team. I am also part of Dr. O'Leary's U.S. History 2 class, and I'm taking an in-depth look at the death penalty, if it's right or not, in the pre-2000s.
Hi, my name is James Wing, and I'm a junior from Wayne Hills High School. I'm a musician, and I'm also the Speaker of the House for Dr. O'Leary's Period 7 U.S. History class.
Hi, my name is Garrett Vandermeer. I'm a member of Dr. O'Leary's U.S. History 2 class. I'm also a member of the soccer team and the golf team, and I will be taking an in-depth look on the history of the death penalty, how it's changed over time, and the countries and organizations how they are affected by it.
So welcome. Once again, my name is Sean Higgins. I'm a junior at Wayne Hills. I'm a member of the varsity ski and volleyball team. So without further ado, let us begin our discussion. Okay, so Mr. Vandermeer, I do believe you have some history on the death penalty. Would you like to share?
Well, the death penalty was started in 1750 BC in the Code of Hammurabi, and since then, or during that time, the common methods used were impaling and also drowning and even being burned at the stake. Since then, it has changed, and now most commonly the biggest difference is that it's not such a public event. Now it's more private, done behind jail cells, and in the United States, for instance, common ways are electrocution, hanging, and also death by firing squad.
Okay, I noticed in the old ways almost, they seem more inhumane and more torturous. But now as it progressed, I guess they found not easier ways, less painful ways to kill people, I guess you could say. Okay, so Mr. Gershon, could you give us some insight on the justifications for the death penalty throughout history?
Well, Mr. Higgins, in 1996, President Bill Clinton signed the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act in 1996, like I said. And these are the charges that would be brought up by the people would be arson, piracy, treason, murder, rape, horse stealing, slave rebellion, and robbery. And these people that create these acts of crime should be held against the death penalty because it's not right for them what to do.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you guys ever have any other justifications or say for instance, a criminal that's a cold-blooded killer, they are just going to keep killing and they have no moral behavior. And do you feel the need that they should be put to death?
Well, Sean, typically people who do get the death penalty are serial killers or rapists and such, but mainly why some people want them to have the death penalty is because It's basically like a tooth for a tooth. Because you killed someone, now it should be done to you. So that way it's all equal.
Okay, so Mr. Phi, do you have any other justifications, or how about some rebuttal?
Yeah, I have a rebuttal. What if perhaps someone is innocent? For example, the Innocence Project works on trying to free innocent prisoners that have been put on death row or life sentences and such. So what would you do to the innocent people? I mean, is it fair if they are put to death for doing something that they didn't do?
Oh wow, that's an excellent point. As many people know, not any law system is like perfect, so there can be a lot of mistrials and just making the wrong calls out there. So I believe Mr. Wang has some insight on this kind of stuff. Would you like to share?
Right, so there are possible chances. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that, murdering is definitely a really bad thing. And I think this is more of a justice-related topic. And I think what, Rafai said is very true. It's important that we keep the justice system, part of a crucial part of our government. Right, and it's not just that. We also have the problem with using too much money on executing criminals, and just those kind of problems, right?
That's true. And back to what somebody said about minors. I do believe Ms. Mirza has some insight on that. Can we hear from you, please?
Yeah, the argument that's been debated for quite some time now is that juveniles shouldn't be put to death because it's cruel and unusual punishment, because they're not the worst of offenders. They're still young and they're making immature and stupid decisions. So there's a lot worse people out there.
That's true. Well, that's about all the time we have left for this segment. So thank you for watching the first segment of this episode of From All Angles. But don't go away. We'll be right back with Jay Cho and what the kids in the hall are saying about the death penalty, and if it is in fact a violation of the 8th Amendment. Welcome back to From All Angles. If you're just tuning in, I'm host and moderator Sean Higgins. Our discussion is focused on the death penalty. The death penalty is the most harsh punishment that one can face for committing a crime. There are currently 27 states that allow the death penalty. As for the remaining 23, they are either considering it or are just against it. There are two main viewpoints on this topic, whether it goes the 8th Amendment or whether it does not. So let's get back to the action. Now let's take a look at what the kids in the halls are saying about the death penalty and whether it goes against the 8th Amendment or not.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Kids in the Hall, one of the few segments from All Angles. I'm Jay Cho, a reporter here to give you the opinions of your fellow peers and teachers. Today is the ongoing debate of the death penalty, and let's see what we have. Today we had the privilege of interviewing Mrs. Stofi, who's been a teacher here for 8 years and has been awarded as the Educator of the Year.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Ms. Stofi. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Okay, so I'm here to ask you a couple of questions on the death penalty.
Okay.
Do you believe that the death penalty violates the 8th Amendment, which basically says that the death penalty is a cruel and unusual punishment?
I do believe it does. I'm against the death penalty. Some of the statistics that we've seen have showed that there have been 144 people who have been on death row and have since been released because of evidence. So I think that it's an alarming rate, and since people are fallible, I believe that the death penalty should be abolished.
Well, with the case now, there's genetic testing, which definitely makes the process more legitimate and definitely more accurate. So those 144 cases, how do you think it fares now that there's more DNA testing, more accurate results?
I don't know that in all cases that there is going to be DNA evidence left. And even with that being the case, we know that in death penalties, when the victims are white, that people are much more likely to I guess, sentence people to death rather than if they were of another color. And that's a problem if we have people who are making decisions based on color of skin, whether it be subconsciously or consciously.
And that's very correct. Now, moving on, recently there's been a trend of lethal injections in death penalty cases. Now, some people say that the death penalty is harmless if using the lethal injection method. So what's your stance on that?
Being that I don't know any of us really would know if it's harmless or not, I certainly think I am against the death penalty in any rate, but I don't think it's harmless. Clearly, if it's putting people to death, it's not quote unquote harmless. And there have been instances where people haven't died right away and instead have died of massive heart attacks, or they had to get another injection. So I think that certainly to call it harmless would be overstated, perhaps more quote unquote humane than other methods, perhaps.
And last question. It's quite obvious that no one really wants to die. And so the question is the death penalty morally correct?
Well, I disagree with your premise that no one wants to die. I think at times people do. So I'm just going to put that out there. Morally correct? No, I don't think that any of us have the right to choose life or death, and that includes people who murder others. But I think morality, whether we like it or not, is something that is specific to how you feel, your culture, your beliefs. So some may argue that is it moral to let someone who's taken the life of others go to prison, be able to eat 3 meals a day when their loved ones are dead. But for me personally, I don't want to play the role of the greater being, if you believe in one, or someone who just makes that decision if someone should be put to death or remain in prison. And if I don't want to do it, I don't think anyone should have to. So with that being the case, I do think it's immoral. And we've learned for many reasons that's certainly a fallible system.
Well, this has been an enlightening experience brought to you by Jay Cho and Mrs. Stoffi.
Okay, well, Ms. Stoffi made some very interesting points. Vanessa, would you like to share on what you think, what she said, or in your rebuttal?
So what Ms. Stoffi said about some people not wanting to live is correct. Some people aren't happy with their life, but the people who go on death penalty are brought there from the things that they do. They brought this onto themselves, which is why they're sentenced to death.
Sean, I have some key points to add to what Vanessa said. Now, if someone, say, killed one of your family members, say they killed your brother or your sister, would you want them to just sit in jail for the rest of their lives, or would you want them to die so you feel some type of relief, thinking that, okay, now I don't have to deal with that
Would you
anymore?
mean like they'd be very angry if like they were still alive? Yes. What are you trying to say?
That's what I'm
Yeah,
that's what
well,
I'm saying.
I would want them to have like the most harsh punishment for what they did to my sibling or loved one.
You'd want justice. You'd
Yeah,
want
I guess you could say I
right
want justice.
then.
Yeah.
So basically, if these people are just sitting in jail, yes, there's the DNA testing, like Mr. Cho said, but if they've been convicted and the DNA proves that they did it, they should die. They deserve it.
Okay.
But does the death penalty offer a real punishment? I mean, isn't it just like an escape of your life sentence in prison? I mean, I think a life sentencing is more effective.
Well, when they sit in jail,
Sorry to cut you off, Jordan. It is now time to send it back to Jay Cho, who is standing by with Junior Matt Ferrara.
Hi, welcome back to another segment of Kids in the Hall. I'm Jay Cho, here to give you an opinion of your peers. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a couple of questions about the death penalty?
of course.
Well, do you believe that the death penalty violates the 8th Amendment, which basically states that the death penalty is a cruel and unusual punishment?
No, not at all. I feel that the death penalty has been a big fundamental part of our society, and I think it really cuts off the problem where it begins. You know what I always say, the best way to stop the kid from stealing a cookie from the cookie jar is to cut off his hand. You know what I mean? The problem is solved. These people, they're born inherently bad, they're going to continue to be bad. Even if you put them in a life in prison, there's a variable of them always getting out. If you kill them, you're done with them, you cut loose ends, they're done. You know what I mean?
I think I do. Wise words.
Thank you.
Well, how do you believe, what do you believe that the crime must be in order to be sentenced to death?
I think murder, rape, or armed robbery, anything that threatens the life of another. I'm very into the eye for the eye, tooth for the tooth philosophy. You take something of mine, we're going to take something of yours, mostly, namely, your life.
Don't you feel it's a little bit hypocritical taking the life of a murderer?
No, not at all. I mean, if that murderer had no problem taking a life in his time, and when he felt he should take a life, then we should have no problem taking his life as a way to deter other criminals from doing such a crime again.
Don't you feel that the death penalty would deter some criminals from committing their own crimes?
I think definitely it would deter them, but I think in the end of the day, it would stop it completely in its tracks, because if you're seeing your friends murdering people and then getting killed, you're going to learn a lesson, you know what I mean? Real quick. You could quote me on this one. You kill someone and you get killed, you could assure that there's no killing.
Well, things would go 0 to 100 real quick.
Real quick.
Well, this has been another segment of Kids in the Hall. I've been joined by Matt Ferrara.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll see you later.
Well, Matt had some radical thoughts going on there. Yasmin, I understand that you are against what he said. Would you like to state something?
Yeah, Matt said that it was a good way to deter criminals from committing crimes, especially the most heinous ones. But it's been said that in law enforcement, they believe that the death penalty is not an effective deterrent against homicides. So I'm not sure how accurate what his statement was, but I don't believe that.
So you don't really agree with the eye for an eye?
No.
Okay.
I also want to talk about what Matt said and a little bit about what Yasmin said. Matt also said something about cutting off the hand of the kid who was reaching for the cookie jar. But if that doesn't sound cool and unusual, then I don't really know what cool and unusual is. And also, there is no scientific or statistical proof that the death penalty will effectively decrease criminal activity.
Okay. Well, like for the cookie analogy Matt was talking about, going for the cookie isn't really as bad as a crime as murder. So I think that's what he was kind of going for there. Not like
Yeah.
you feel okay. Do we have any other rebuttal?
Yeah. If it was a child or someone that was like mentally ill, I don't think they should be put to death, because it's not fair. First of all, the child isn't.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Ms. Mirza, but it's time to go back to Jay Cho as he gets Senior Allie Davies' thoughts on this topic.
Hi, welcome to another segment of Kids in the Hall. I'm here to give you more opinions about the death penalty. Hi, excuse me. Can I have your opinion on the death penalty?
Sure thing.
Well, the question is, does the death penalty violate the Eighth Amendment, which is basically saying that it's a cruel and unusual punishment?
Yes, I think it's like one of the most cruelest and unusual punishments there is.
Well, people argue that the death penalty would deter criminals from committing their own crimes. How do you feel about that?
I don't think it makes a difference if they enacted the death penalty on stuff like that, because like it's not going to stop people from committing crimes. I mean, there's a death penalty in some states now, and people still commit crimes. People still murder each other and steal things. It doesn't deter anything.
Additionally, the death penalty is sought after as retribution for many victims' families. What do you think about the death penalty being used as retribution?
An eye for an eye leaves the world blind. It doesn't change anything.
As Muhammad Gandhi would say, an eye for an eye will make the world blind. Now, last question here. There's a growing threat of overpopulation in prisons. So people say that the death penalty could possibly solve this problem. How do you feel about that?
I think killing people to make space is just very cruel to do. I mean, that's just not fair. Like, oh, I'm just going to put someone on death row just so we can put more prisoners in a prison. Makes no sense.
Very wise. On to the next segment, please.
Okay, well, Ms. Davies had some very key important points she was talking about. Ms. Mirza, would you like to share on anything or add anything?
Yeah, sure. Like I was saying before, if the murderer or rapist or anyone was a child or someone mentally ill, I don't think they should be put on death penalty, because if you're a child, you're not mature enough to make the best decision, so you can't really be the worst of offenders possible. And if you're mentally ill, there's like scientific proof that like your cognitive behaviors are not developed properly, so you're physically not aware of your actions.
That's interesting. Do we have any?
Yeah, I'd like to say something back to Sarah. What do you recommend be done with someone who is mentally ill? How do you think they should be treated then?
They should just be put in an asylum for help, because that's really all they need. They need medicine to help control their thoughts and their impulses.
Okay. And also, if I could, originally I was on the fence before seeing these 3 interviews, and now post-interviews, I've decided that I'm against the death penalty. And one of my main factors for being against the death penalty is that it's very expensive, it's costly. Costs about $3.2 million to kill someone on average in the United States. And also, it's not always effective, like Ms. Stoffi said. Sometimes it has its errors and its flaws. People have heart attacks.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vander. We've got to cut you off here.
No problem, Sean.
Don't go anywhere, folks. We're going to be right back with some more discussion on the death penalty. Welcome back to From All Angles. I am host and moderator Sean Higgins. In this program, my classmates and I examined issues surrounding the death penalty. We outlined many different arguments as to why it does or does not violate the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. In this final segment, we will share our own views on this issue after conducting research and discussing the many issues that surround the practice of putting people to death as a just punishment for the criminal acts. So let's get back to the action. Okay, so Mr. Vandermeer, can you recap on what you said yesterday in the last segment?
Of course. So just to reiterate, earlier I decided after watching the interviews, I'm now against the death penalty. And one of my main reasons for being against is that it costs about $3.2 million in most states just to kill someone. And from what Ms. Stoffi said, it's not always 100%. Sometimes they don't die, they have heart attacks, so it's painful. Mr. Fry, do you have something to add to that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Vandermeer. A study conducted by North Carolina showed that people that were put in life prison without parole was about $2 million less than being put to death. So that's pretty important.
Those are interesting facts. Like say you let the person live, costs less, and I feel like everybody would rather live. But I guess the criminal doesn't really get a say in this because they're the one that committed the crime, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else to add to this?
I'd like to say something, Mr. Higgins. About what Mr. Fye said, if you have more people that are in life in prison without parole, then there should be more overpopulated in all the jails. So with the inmates on death row, and if more people were killed, there'd be more space in the prisons.
Okay. So, would you rather spend more money and then have more space in there?
I'd rather spend the money than to have overpopulation
I
in the
feel like
jails.
$3 million is a lot of money to kill one person, though.
It's a lot of money, but it's probably worth it.
Well, that's debatable. Can anybody else have any rebuttal for that?
I have something to say, actually. Considering the monumental amount of money used to execute criminals, there's also the chance of killing off someone who may or may not be innocent, right? And that is also something we should consider in capital punishment.
That's a very scary thought. Do we have any court cases that anybody knows about? Any? Ms. Soto, I believe you have something to add on the criminal aspect of it.
I have a couple people who do believe that death penalty should be a punishment. Hillary and Bill Clinton, Ron Paul, and John McCain all support the death penalty. Hillary Clinton made note during her 2000 Senate campaign that the Innocence Protection Act does require DNA testing before administering the federal execution. So they're really, if it's your DNA, so there's really no way you could get it wrong if you committed the crime.
That's true. But there's always slips in the system. Like, there's always flaws in every system, and someone could easily make a mistake. Nobody's perfect.
I'll agree, nobody's perfect. But you can't physically change who you are. You can't change your blood. You can't change your system.
Yes, but the Innocence Project proved that out of the 3,200 people who are put on death row every year, over 100 of those people are innocent. So that it's possible to slip up.
That's a very interesting fact. And it's kind of outrageous to think that 100 people can be mistried. Miss Mirza, do you have anything to add on, let's say, kids, minors about this topic?
Yeah, there was a case against Thompson versus Oklahoma. The U.S. Supreme Court determined that a death sentence for a defendant who was 15 years old at the time of the murder would constitute as cruel and unusual punishment in the 8th and 14th Amendments.
Wow, and they put this kid to death?
No, it was ruled as cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh, okay. That's quite a touchy subject, because nobody really likes the thought of putting a child to death.
Yeah, because the argument is that the children they can't be the worst of offenders, because the purpose of the death penalty is to put away the worst and most heinous offenders out there. And if you're a kid, they have time, like, they're still developing, like, their brains aren't developed, they don't know anything.
Does anybody over here have any information, or over here, on other ways that it's used, the death penalty?
Actually, I could add something to that from other organizations that are also against the death penalty. Some of those include the United Nations, which is a very large group, and also
so the United Nations is in fact against it?
Yeah, they have made efforts to abolish the death penalty.
But America is part of the UN. How does that work out?
Relatively, but at the same time, like, the United Nations has only made efforts at this point to abolish it. It's not a mandatory thing to be in the United Nations. And also, another organization is the Council of Europe. And the Council of Europe, in order to be in it, you have to have abolished the death penalty. So, as you can imagine, Europe has much less influence with the death penalty and capital punishment.
Also, sorry, Sean.
It's okay.
Well, there are only 4 countries left in the whole entire world that use the death penalty, and we are one of them. So that coincides with what Mr. Vandermeer talked about with the United Nations.
That's very interesting. Does anybody have any final things to say about this topic?
I do. If a crime was committed by, let's say, someone who has schizophrenia or any type of disorder, just freaks out and they kill someone, they shouldn't be put to death because they're not in control of their actions.
That's true. And schizophrenia usually happens not right when a child is born, it later on develops.
Yeah.
So they have to, like, catch it later on in their life, you mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it all depends on how some people handle things differently. If they hear, like, voices in their head saying, like, you need to get rid of this person, they're looking at you weird, or they're out to get you, they're with the government, then they have, like, the instinct to just kill that person.
Interesting. Well, I'm sorry, that's about all the time we have. That concludes our first episode of From All Angles, focused on the death penalty. I would like to thank our panel of experts, Mr. Fai, Ms. Mirza, and Ms. Soto. Thank you for your efforts spending countless hours putting all your research together. I would like to thank all the historical experts as well, Mr. Gershon, Mr. Wang, and Mr. Vandermeer, for sharing helpful historical information on the death penalty. Thank you to Jae Ki-young Cho for hosting the Kids in the Hall segment of this program. Also, a big thank you to all the Kids in the Hall's participants, Ms. Stoffy, Junior Matt Ferrara, and Senior Alexander Davies. Lastly, thanks to Mr. Hookstrait and his Period 5 TV production class for their expertise. Well, that's it for this segment on the death penalty. Once again, my name is Sean Higgins. I am your host and moderator of From All Angles. Before we leave, here's some questions. Compared to GPA, do standardized testing results demonstrate intelligence more accurately? In other words, which is more effective at measuring intelligence? Currently, nearly all colleges or universities require some sort of standardized test grade for admission. Tune in again as the From All Angles team tries to get an angle on the degree to which standardized testing should be used to assess students' readiness for college and career. Tweet us or post your answer on our Facebook page at From All Angles Tune. This is From All Angles. Catch us next time. You do not want to miss out on this debate. Thank you.